The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine as Ethan, 28, and Caleb, 32, stood on their new porch, hands clasped, staring at the stars above their modest Oregon home. They dreamed of this moment, their first house together, a sanctuary built on years of love and struggle. But across the street, a pair of cold eyes watched from a darkened window, already plotting to shatter their peace. Ethan's fingers tightened around Caleb's, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think we'll ever just belong?" Caleb, ever the optimist, kissed his temple. "We belong to each other. That's enough for now." But it wasn't long before their neighbor, Roger Hammond, made it clear he disagreed. Roger, a grizzled man in his 50s with a permanent scowl, had lived on Maple Street for decades, his worldview as rigid as the oak in his front yard. To him, Ethan and Caleb's presence was an affront, a stain on his idea of a proper neighborhood. It started small. A glare here, a muttered slur there. Ethan, who worked as a graphic designer, would find his car tires slashed after late-night projects. Caleb, a high school history teacher, noticed their mailbox stuffed with hateful flyers, each one more venomous than the last. "Go back where you came from," one read, as if love had a hometown they'd abandoned. They tried to ignore it, to focus on the life they were building, painting their living room sage green, planting tulips in the garden, laughing over burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings. But Roger's harassment grew bolder. One evening, as Ethan hung a pride flag in their window, a rock sailed through the glass, shattering it inches from his face. Caleb rushed to him, heart pounding, as Ethan stood frozen, shards glittering at his feet. "We can't let him win," Caleb said, pulling Ethan close. But fear had crept in, a shadow over their joy. They reported the incident to the police, but Roger denied everything, and with no witnesses, the case went cold. The neighborhood, once a quiet haven, felt like a battlefield. Word spread slowly. At first, only a few neighbors noticed the tension. Mrs. Alvarez, a retired nurse in her 70s, saw the broken window and left a casserole on their doorstep with a note, "You're not alone." But others, like the Wilsons across the street, kept their distance, unwilling to cross Roger, whose temper was legendary. Ethan and Caleb felt the weight of isolation, their dream home turning into a fortress they had to defend. Yet, something stirred in Ethan. He'd grown up hiding who he was, shrinking to fit into a world that didn't want him. This time, he refused to cower. "We need to fight back," he told Caleb one night, his voice steady despite the tremble in his hands. Caleb, who'd always been the practical one, hesitated. "What if it makes things worse?" he asked, his blue eyes clouded with worry. But Ethan's resolve was unshakable. "If we don't stand up, who will?" They started small, hosting a barbecue for the block, inviting everyone, Roger included, though he didn't show. The turnout was modest, but the laughter and chatter felt like a rebellion. Mrs. Alvarez brought her famous empanadas, and the Patels, a young couple with a toddler, shared stories of their own struggles as immigrants. For one night, Ethan and Caleb felt seen, their home a beacon of hope. But Roger wasn't done. The next morning, their front door was spray-painted with a slur in jagged red letters. The sight hit Ethan like a punch. He sank to the porch, tears burning his eyes. Caleb knelt beside him, silent but furious. "This ends now," Caleb said, his voice low and fierce. They decided to install security cameras, documenting every move Roger made. The footage captured him lurking near their property at night, his face twisted with malice. They shared the videos online, not to shame him, but to show the truth. The post went viral in their small town, sparking whispers that grew into a roar. By the end of the first month, the neighborhood was divided. Some rallied behind Ethan and Caleb, leaving flowers and notes of support. Others, swayed by Roger's loud rants about traditional values, turned a blind eye. But Ethan and Caleb weren't alone anymore. A spark had been lit, and the fight for their place in the world was just beginning. The viral post changed everything. Ethan woke to hundreds of notification strangers sharing their story, offering encouragement, and condemning Roger's actions. Caleb, scrolling through the comments, found messages from across the country. You're not alone. Keep fighting. Love always wins. But with the support came backlash. Roger, enraged by the public scrutiny, doubled down. He stood on his lawn, shouting slurs for all to hear, his voice echoing through the quiet streets. Ethan felt the pressure building. Maybe we should move, he said one night, his voice heavy with defeat. Caleb shook his head. This is our home. We don't run. Their resolve was tested when Roger began targeting their allies. Mrs. Alvarez found her garden vandalized, her roses trampled. The Patels received anonymous threats, warning them to stay out of it. Fear rippled through the neighborhood, but so did defiance. A local activist group, Pride and Unity, caught wind of the story. Led by Jamie, a non-binary college student with a knack for organizing, they reached out to Ethan and Caleb. We want to help, Jamie said, their voice brimming with conviction. They proposed a community vigil to show solidarity, a public stand against hate. Ethan hesitated, wary of escalating the conflict. But Caleb saw the bigger picture. This isn't just about us anymore, he said. It's about everyone who's ever felt like they don't belong. The vigil was set for the following Saturday in the neighborhood park. Ethan and Caleb spent the week preparing, their nerves frayed but their spirits bolstered by the growing support. They printed flyers, baked cookies, and worked with Jamie to spread the word. By Friday, the event had drawn attention from local media, amplifying their message. But Roger wasn't idle. He plastered the neighborhood with his own flyers, calling the vigil a disgrace and rallying his own supporters. The night of the vigil, the park glowed with candlelight. Over 100 people showed up, neighbors, strangers, even a few teachers from Caleb's school. Ethan stood at the podium, his heart racing, and spoke. We didn't choose this fight, he said, his voice cracking. But we're here, and we're not going anywhere. The crowd cheered, their candles a sea of flickering hope. Caleb took Ethan's hand, his pride evident in his steady gaze. Roger arrived late, flanked by a small group of supporters, their faces twisted with anger. He heckled from the sidelines, but the crowd drowned him out with songs of unity. For the first time, Ethan felt the tide turning. But the victory was short-lived. That night, their car was set ablaze in their driveway, the flames licking the sky. The fire department arrived quickly, but the damage was done. Ethan and Caleb stood in the street, watching their car burn, their resolve tested once again. The police, now under public pressure, took the incident seriously. The security footage showed a figure matching Roger's build, but it wasn't enough for an arrest. Frustration gnawed at Ethan, but Caleb remained steadfast. He's losing, Caleb said. He's desperate. They leaned on their growing community, who helped them replace the car through a fundraiser. The act of kindness restored their faith, but the war wasn't over. The car fire marked a turning point. The neighborhood, once divided, began to coalesce around Ethan and Caleb. People who'd stayed silent started speaking up. The Wilsons, who'd avoided the conflict, left a note apologizing for their inaction and offering to help with repairs. Even Roger's longtime friend, Mr. Thompson, a quiet widower, distanced himself, shaken by the violence. Ethan and Caleb, though shaken, found strength in the growing support. They organized a neighborhood watch with Jamie's help, ensuring no one felt alone. The group met weekly, sharing stories and strategies to combat hate. Ethan, once shy, found his voice, leading discussions with a passion that surprised even Caleb. "You're a natural," Caleb teased, but his eyes shone with admiration. Roger, meanwhile, grew more erratic. His rants became public spectacles, alienating even his remaining allies. He posted online, calling Ethan and Caleb instigators and blaming them for the neighborhood's unrest. But his words backfired. The comments sections turned against him, filled with stories of others who'd faced similar harassment. Ethan and Caleb's story had become a rallying cry, a symbol of resistance. One afternoon, a stranger knocked on their door. Lena, a lawyer in her 40s, had seen their story online and offered pro bono legal help. "You have a case," she said, reviewing the footage and police reports. "We can file for a restraining order and sue for damages." Ethan felt a surge of hope, but Caleb was cautious. "What if it escalates things?" he asked. Lena's response was firm. "He's already escalated. Now we fight back legally." The legal battle began quietly, but gained traction. Lena uncovered Roger's history of complaints other neighbors he'd bullied over petty disputes. The evidence painted a picture of a man consumed by anger, unable to adapt to a changing world. Ethan and Caleb, meanwhile, continued to build their community. They hosted potlucks, movie nights, even a small pride parade in the park, each event drawing more people. Roger's response was predictable. He defaced their pride decorations, tearing down rainbow flags and leaving hateful notes. But this time, the neighborhood reacted swiftly. The Patels and Mrs. Alvarez helped repaint their fence, and a group of teens from Caleb's school cleaned up the mess. The acts of kindness, small and large, wove a tighter bond among the community. By the end of the third month, the restraining order was granted. Roger was barred from contacting Ethan and Caleb or approaching their property. The victory felt bittersweet relief, tempered by the knowledge that Roger's hatred hadn't vanished. Ethan lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. "Do you think he'll ever change?" he asked. Caleb sighed, pulling him close. "Maybe not. But we're changing things. That's what matters." The restraining order didn't stop Roger entirely. He found loopholes standing just outside the legal boundary, glaring at Ethan and Caleb's house, or muttering slurs loud enough to carry across the street. But the neighborhood's response had shifted. People no longer ignored him. When he shouted, someone would shout back, calling him out. The tide of public opinion was turning, and Roger was drowning in it. Ethan and Caleb leaned into their community work, their home becoming a hub for change. They started a support group for local LGBTQ youth, inspired by Jamie's activism. The meetings, held in their living room, were filled with laughter, tears, and stories of resilience. Ethan, who'd once felt like an outsider, found purpose in helping others feel seen. Caleb, ever the teacher, shared lessons on history's unsung heroes, showing the kids they weren't alone in their struggles. The lawsuit against Roger progressed slowly, but Lena was relentless. She uncovered more evidence neighbors who'd witnessed Roger's actions but had been too afraid to speak up. One, a shy teenager named Mia, admitted to seeing Roger spray paint their door. Her testimony was a game changer, strengthening their case. Ethan and Caleb thanked her with a homemade cake, their gratitude overwhelming. Roger's behavior grew more desperate. He tried to rally support at a town hall meeting, claiming he was the victim of a woke mob. But his speech fell flat. The room, filled with neighbors who'd attended the vigil or donated to the fundraiser, stared back in silence. Mrs. Alvarez stood up, her voice trembling but clear. "You don't speak for us," she said. "This neighborhood is about love, not hate." The applause that followed shook Ethan to his core. The community's unity began to wear Roger down. His allies dwindled, and his outbursts grew less frequent. Ethan noticed a change in himself, too. The fear that had once gripped him was fading, replaced by a quiet strength. He and Caleb celebrated small victories: a new flower bed, a repaired window, a night without nightmares. Their love, once a target, became a shield. But the fight wasn't over. One evening, Roger crossed the line again, leaving a threatening voicemail on Caleb's phone. The violation of the restraining order was enough for an arrest. As police led Roger away, Ethan watched from the porch, a mix of relief and sadness washing over him. "He chose this," Caleb said softly. Ethan nodded, but a part of him wondered if hate could ever truly be defeated. Roger's arrest was a turning point, but not the end. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip, some pitying Roger, others celebrating his downfall. Ethan and Caleb tried to focus on healing, but the scars of the past months lingered. Their home, once a symbol of hope, bore the marks of vandalism, faded paint, cracked windows, memories of fear. The support group grew, drawing more kids and even a few parents. One evening, a shy boy named Lucas shared his story of coming out to his family, his voice breaking as he described their rejection. Ethan listened, his heart aching, and offered words of comfort he wished he'd heard at that age. Caleb, ever practical, connected Lucas with a counselor, building a network of support that extended beyond their living room. Lena pushed the lawsuit forward, seeking damages for the car fire and emotional distress. The case drew media attention, with reporters camping outside Ethan and Caleb's house. They gave one interview, speaking not of revenge but of resilience. "We just want to live," Ethan said, his voice steady on camera. "We want to love without fear." The broadcast resonated, inspiring donations and letters from across the country. Roger, out on bail, kept a low profile, but his presence loomed. Ethan caught glimpses of him mowing his lawn, his face a mask of resentment. The neighborhood watch remained vigilant, ensuring he didn't cross the line again. Jamie organized a mural project, painting a vibrant rainbow on a community center wall, a bold statement of acceptance. Ethan and Caleb joined in, their hands covered in paint, laughing with neighbors who'd become family. A breakthrough came when Mr. Thompson, Roger's old friend, knocked on their door. "I was wrong to stay silent," he said, his voice heavy with regret. He shared that Roger's hatred stemmed from personal Pina son who'd cut contact years ago, possibly over similar prejudices. The revelation didn't excuse Roger, but it humanized him. Ethan felt a flicker of empathy, though Caleb remained skeptical. The mural's unveiling was a celebration, with music, food, and speeches. Ethan spoke last, his voice raw with emotion. "This isn't just about us," he said. "It's about every person who's been told they don't belong." The crowd roared, and Caleb pulled him into a kiss, unashamed and unafraid. For the first time in months, they felt free. The mural became a local landmark, drawing visitors who left flowers and notes at its base. Ethan and Caleb's story spread, inspiring other communities to confront hate. But the legal battle loomed, a storm cloud on the horizon. Lena warned them that Roger's lawyer was fighting hard, claiming he was unfairly targeted. The stress weighed on Ethan, who began to doubt their decision to sue. Caleb, sensing his partner's struggle, planned a quiet weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains. They hiked, cooked over a fire, and talked about their future. "I want us to grow old here," Caleb said, his hand resting on Ethan's. "No matter what happens." Ethan smiled, the weight lifting slightly. They returned home renewed, ready to face the courtroom. The trial began with a packed gallery, neighbors, activists, even strangers who'd followed the story. Ethan testified first, his voice trembling as he recounted the rock through their window, the car fire, the slurs. Caleb followed, his calm demeanor masking his pain. Roger's lawyer tried to paint them as provocateurs, but Lena dismantled the argument, presenting the security footage and Mia's testimony. Roger took the stand, defiant but shaken. He claimed his actions were about protecting the neighborhood, but his words rang hollow. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened intently, her face unreadable. When the verdict came, it was a victory. Roger was ordered to pay damages and attend sensitivity training. The courtroom erupted in cheers, but Ethan and Caleb sat quietly, holding hands. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Ethan and Caleb slipped away, needing space. They walked to the park, sitting under the stars where the vigil had been held. "Did we do the right thing?" Ethan asked. Caleb nodded. "We showed the world what love can do." But the victory felt incomplete. Roger's punishment didn't erase the pain, and Ethan wondered if true change was possible. The neighborhood continued to evolve. The Patels hosted a Diwali celebration, inviting everyone, including Roger, who didn't attend. Mrs. Alvarez started a book club, choosing stories of acceptance. Ethan and Caleb felt their roots deepening, their home a true sanctuary at last. Life settled into a new rhythm. Ethan and Caleb rebuilt, their home brighter with new paint and flowers. The support group thrived, with Lucas becoming a regular, his confidence growing. Ethan found joy in mentoring, while Caleb worked on a curriculum to teach inclusivity at his school. But Roger's presence lingered, a reminder of the fragility of peace. One morning, a letter arrived, handwritten and unsigned. "I'm sorry," it read. "I was wrong." Ethan and Caleb suspected it was from Roger, but they couldn't be sure. They debated reaching out, but Lena advised against it, citing the restraining order. Instead, they focused on their community, planning a second Pride event, bigger than the first. The event was a triumph, with live music, food trucks, and a speech from Jamie, who'd become a local hero. Ethan and Caleb danced under string lights, their laughter mingling with the crowds. Even Mr. Thompson attended, a quiet gesture of support. Roger's house stayed dark, its windows shuttered. Rumors swirled that he was moving, unable to face the community he'd alienated. The lawsuit's damages covered their losses, but Ethan and Caleb donated most of it to Pride and Unity, ensuring the fight continued. They framed the restraining order, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of their strength. Their home became a symbol, its pride flag flying high, unyielding. One evening, Lucas stopped by, beaming. "My parents called," he said. "They want to talk." Ethan hugged him, tears in his eyes. The moment felt like a ripple, proof that change was possible. Caleb, watching from the kitchen, smiled softly. "We're making a difference," he said. Ethan nodded, his heart full. But the past wasn't gone. Late one night, Ethan woke to a noise outside. He grabbed his phone, checking the security cameras, but saw nothing. The fear lingered, a shadow that refused to fade. Caleb pulled him close, whispering, "We're okay. We've got this." And for the first time, Ethan truly believed it. Spring arrived, blanketing Maple Street in color. Ethan and Caleb's garden bloomed, a testament to their resilience. The neighborhood had changeless fear. More connection. Roger's house went up for sale. Its for sale sign a quiet admission of defeat. Ethan felt a pang of relief, but also a strange sadness. Hate hadn't won, but it had left marks on them all. The final Pride event of the season was a community affair, with neighbors of all ages painting banners and sharing stories. Ethan and Caleb stood at the center, no longer just victims, but leaders. Jamie announced a scholarship fund in their name, supporting LGBTQ youth. The crowd's applause felt like a promise kept. One evening, Mr. Thompson stopped by with a gift of photo album of the neighborhood's journey, from the vigil to the mural. "You changed us," he said, his voice thick. Ethan flipped through the pages, seeing their story through others' eyes. Caleb squeezed his hand, his pride unspoken but clear. The new neighbors, a young family, moved into Roger's house. They hung a pride flag in solidarity, a gesture that brought Ethan to tears. The street felt whole, a place where love could thrive. Ethan and Caleb sat on their porch, watching the sunset, their hands intertwined. "We did it," Ethan whispered. Caleb smiled. "We're just getting started." Years later, Lucas, now in college, wrote to them. "You showed me I could be myself," he said. The letter hung on their wall, next to the pride flag, a reminder of why they'd fought. Their story had sparked a movement, proving that love, backed by community, could overcome even the deepest hate. And as they looked out at their neighborhood, now a beacon of acceptance, Ethan and Caleb knew they'd found their place in the world.